Imagine discovering an ancient book hidden for centuries, containing secrets about the creation of the world, fallen angels, and prophecies about the end of times. Now imagine that this book was once part of the Bible, until someone decided it was too dangerous to be read. This isn't the plot of a Dan Brown movie. It's the real story of the Book of Jubilees, a text that was venerated as sacred scripture for over 1,000 years before being banned from the biblical canon and almost completely forgotten. Hello everyone, welcome to another video on our channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious and controversial texts ever written, the Book of Jubilees. But before we begin, a warning. What I'm about to reveal today might fundamentally change your perception of the Bible and even human history. Are you ready? For many scholars, the Book of Jubilees represents a missing link in understanding early Jewish and Christian traditions. But for others, it contains dangerous heresies that threaten the foundations of faith. What does this book contain that was considered so dangerous it had to be removed from the Bible? Why has this text been kept in the shadows for so long? And what secrets might it reveal about our past and future? Today, we'll uncover the mysteries of this banned biblical text, exploring its origins, its controversial content, and the real reasons it may have been hidden from the public eye for centuries. The Book of Jubilees is sometimes called the Little Genesis because it retells much of the Book of Genesis and part of Exodus, but with fascinating additional details that never made it into our modern Bible. Written around 150 BCE, during a time of great religious and political upheaval, this text provides a window into beliefs that existed before mainstream Christianity took shape. One of the most striking features of Jubilees is its precise chronology. The book divides history into periods or jubilees of 49 years, mapping out the timeline of creation and early human history with remarkable precision. According to Jubilees, the entire history of the world was predetermined before creation itself, organized into these perfect Jubilee cycles. But this level of divine determinism wasn't what got the book banned. To understand that, we need to look deeper into its controversial revelations. The first bombshell in Jubilees concerns the role of angels in human affairs. While the canonical Bible mentions angels, Jubilees goes much further, describing in detail how angels directly instructed human beings, teaching them various arts and sciences. It describes a universe teeming with spiritual beings who actively participate in worldly matters. Perhaps most controversially, Jubilees claims that many of the laws given to Moses were actually in effect since the beginning of creation, observed by the patriarchs long before Mount Sinai. This upends the traditional biblical timeline and challenges the uniqueness of the Mosaic covenant, which would have been deeply problematic for both Jewish and Christian authorities. But the revelations about angels and demons are where things get really interesting. Jubilees provides a detailed account of the fall of the angels known as the Watchers, who descended to earth and took human wives. This unholy union produced the Nephilim, giants who brought violence and corruption to the world. According to Jubilees, demons are actually the disembodied spirits of these Nephilim who continue to torment humanity after the flood destroyed their physical bodies. This elaborate demonology, featuring Mastema as the chief of demons, goes far beyond anything in the canonical texts and would have seemed dangerously close to polytheism for later monotheistic authorities. The Book of Jubilees also includes a precise calendar system based on 364 days, exactly 52 weeks, with each quarter having 91 days. This solar calendar stands in stark contrast to the lunar calendar used in later Jewish tradition. Why was this important enough to get a book banned? Because control of the calendar meant control of religious festivals and observances. It was about religious authority itself. Jubilees claims this solar calendar was the original divine plan revealed by angels, suggesting that those using other calendars were violating God's intended order. This would have directly challenged the authority of religious leaders who had established different calendar systems. Another startling revelation concerns the figure of Enoch, who is merely mentioned briefly in Genesis as having walked with God before being taken away. In Jubilees, Enoch becomes a central figure who was the first man to learn writing and knowledge from the angels. He is portrayed as recording the heavenly knowledge and the judgment of the world. This expansion of Enoch's role connects Jubilees with another banned text, the Book of Enoch, suggesting these works preserved an alternative tradition of revelation that mainstream religious authorities later suppressed. One of the most significant aspects of Jubilees is how it portrays the origins of evil. Unlike the traditional understanding, where human sin begins with Adam and Eve's disobedience, Jubilees presents a more complex picture where corruption enters the world through rebellious angels. This cosmic origin of evil shifts some responsibility away from humanity and onto supernatural beings. This cosmology raises profound theological questions. If spiritual beings corrupted humanity, does that diminish human responsibility for sin? Does it challenge the doctrine of original sin that became central to later Christian theology? These questions struck at the heart of emerging religious dogma. The Book of Jubilees also makes a remarkable claim about language. It states that Hebrew was the original language of creation, the language spoken by Adam in Eden and by all humanity before the confusion at Babel. Furthermore, it claims that Abraham rediscovered this sacred language when angels taught it to him. This elevation of Hebrew to a divine status would have significant implications for religious authority. Those who preserved and interpreted Hebrew texts could claim a special connection to divine revelation. In later centuries, as Christianity sought to distance itself from its Jewish roots, such claims would have been problematic. Now, let's address perhaps the most controversial revelation in Jubilees, its unique take on the identity and role of the chosen people. While the canonical Bible describes the selection of Abraham and his descendants as chosen by God, Jubilees takes this concept much further. According to Jubilees, the division of humanity into different nations was preordained before creation, with Israel already chosen as God's portion. It claims that the Hebrew patriarchs observed all the later Mosaic laws, including circumcision, Sabbaths, and festivals, suggesting these practices were eternal divine mandates rather than part of a specific historical covenant. This portrayal essentially universalizes Jewish law, implying it was always binding on all righteous people throughout history. For early Christian authorities seeking to establish that Christ had freed believers from these requirements, such claims would have been deeply problematic. Additionally, Jubilees contains some of the strongest statements on separation between Israelites and Gentiles found in any ancient text. It strictly forbids intermarriage and even eating with Gentiles, presenting complete separation as divine mandate. This extreme position would have contradicted the inclusive message that early Christianity was trying to promote, but there's a deeper, more mystical layer to Jubilees that may explain why it was truly considered dangerous. Throughout the text, there are hints of secret knowledge, the kind that was traditionally reserved for initiates. For example, Jubilees provides elaborate details about the workings of the heavenly realm, the names and functions of angels, and cosmic processes invisible to ordinary humans. It suggests an entire parallel reality of spiritual beings and forces operating alongside our visible world. This type of revealed cosmic knowledge was characteristic of apocalyptic and mystical traditions that flourished around the time of Jubilees' composition. Later, religious authorities often viewed such mystical knowledge with suspicion, preferring to emphasize faith and obedience rather than direct mystical insight. The Book of Jubilees also contains what could be interpreted as coded prophecies about the end times. It speaks of cycles of corruption and purification, suggesting that human history follows predetermined patterns that will culminate in a final judgment. According to Jubilees, history is divided into 49 Jubilee periods of 49 years each, for a total of 2,401 years from creation until entry into the Promised Land. Many scholars believe this system was intended to predict the coming of Messianic age after a specific number of Jubilee cycles. If religious authorities interpreted these prophecies as predicting the end of their own authority or challenging their power, they would have had strong motivation to suppress the text. Throughout history, apocalyptic predictions have often been censored when they threatened established power structures. One of the most fascinating aspects of Jubilees is its connection to other forbidden texts like the Book of Enoch and the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. Together, these works suggest the existence of an alternative tradition of biblical interpretation that was gradually pushed aside by what would become mainstream Judaism and Christianity. The discovery of multiple copies of Jubilees among the Dead Sea Scrolls confirms that this text was highly valued by the Qumran community, a group that many scholars believe separated themselves from the Jerusalem priesthood due to disagreements about calendar, ritual purity, and biblical interpretation. This raises an intriguing possibility. Was the Book of Jubilees part of a suppressed tradition that preserved older, more authentic understandings of biblical events? Did it contain inconvenient truths that later religious authorities preferred to hide? The survival of Jubilees within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which preserves it as canonical scripture to this day, suggests the book's suppression wasn't universal. In Ethiopia, these teachings weren't considered dangerous heresies, but sacred revelations. So what specifically might have led to the book's removal from most biblical canons? The answer likely involves politics as much as theology. During the formative periods of both Rabbinic Judaism and early Christianity, religious leaders sought to solidify their authority and establish clear boundaries around their faiths. Jubilees presented several challenges to this process. Its elaborate angelology and demonology could be seen as compromising strict monotheism. Its insistence on a solar calendar contradicted established practice. Its elevation of patriarchs to law-observant figures challenged ideas about the uniqueness of later covenants. And its deterministic view of history potentially undermined the role of religious authorities as interpreters of God's will. For Christianity specifically, Jubilees' emphasis on the eternal nature of the Mosaic law would have contradicted Paul's teachings about freedom from the law through Christ. As Christianity increasingly defined itself in opposition to Judaism, texts that blurred these boundaries became problematic. But perhaps the most dangerous aspect of Jubilees was its implication that direct revelation from heavenly beings was possible outside official channels. The text describes multiple instances of angels directly instructing humans, suggesting that divine truth could bypass established religious hierarchies. Throughout history, religious authorities have often been deeply suspicious of claims to direct revelation, preferring to position themselves as the necessary mediators between heaven and earth. Jubilees' vision of a world where angelic beings regularly communicated with worthy individuals threatened this control. There's another fascinating possibility to consider. Did the Book of Jubilees preserve traditions about technological or scientific knowledge that was considered too advanced or dangerous for public consumption? The text describes angels teaching humans various arts and sciences, writing, healing, astrology, and weather prediction among them. In ancient times, such knowledge was often closely guarded, with advanced technological understanding sometimes being preserved as secret wisdom within mystery schools and esoteric traditions. Could Jubilees have contained coded references to advanced knowledge that priestly classes preferred to monopolize? While speculative, this theory would explain why certain elites might want to restrict access to the text while still preserving it for their own use. Another controversial element of Jubilees involves its treatment of women. While the canonical Bible often minimizes female characters, Jubilees provides expanded roles and names for many women, including the wives of patriarchs. It portrays several women as active participants in the religious life of their communities. However, Jubilees also establishes stricter rules for female purity and conduct than found in canonical texts. This complex portrayal of women's roles might have conflicted with the direction religious authorities wished to take regarding gender relations in their communities. The fate of the Book of Jubilees raises deeper questions about how religious canons are formed and what gets left out of official narratives. The process of canonization typically involves decisions made by religious authorities about which texts best serve their understanding of doctrine and their community needs. But what happens to the alternative perspectives contained in excluded texts? Do they represent genuine alternative traditions that might contain valuable insights or dangerous misconceptions rightfully suppressed? In the case of Jubilees, we're fortunate that copies survived despite its exclusion from mainstream canons. Its preservation allows modern readers to glimpse a time when biblical interpretation was more fluid and diverse than many realize. Modern scholarship increasingly recognizes that the development of religious traditions isn't a simple linear progression, but rather a complex process involving competing perspectives, with certain voices becoming dominant while others are marginalized. The renewed interest in texts like Jubilees represents an opportunity to recover some of these lost voices and develop a more nuanced understanding of how our religious traditions evolved. So what relevance does this ancient banned book have for us today? In many ways, the conflicts reflected in Jubilees' suppression mirror contemporary struggles over religious authority, interpretation, and access to knowledge. Who gets to decide religious truth? Is revelation complete and closed or ongoing? How should ancient texts be interpreted in changing times? These questions were as vital when Jubilees was excluded from the canon as they are in today's religious discussions. Additionally, Jubilees' detailed cosmology reminds us that our ancestors were deeply concerned with understanding their place in a vast universe. The same fundamental question that drives much of our modern scientific and philosophical inquiry. The Book of Jubilees stands as testimony to humanity's enduring quest to understand the mysterious forces that shape our world and our lives. Whether viewed as divine revelation or human speculation, it represents an ambitious attempt to make sense of existence and find meaning in the patterns of history. As we conclude our exploration of this fascinating text, I encourage you to consider how the rediscovery of banned religious works can enrich our understanding not just of history, but of the perennial human search for truth. Perhaps the most dangerous thing about the Book of Jubilees wasn't any specific teaching it contained, but the very reminder that religious traditions are more diverse, complex, and open to interpretation than dogmatic authorities often wish to admit. In bringing these ancient words back into the light, we reclaim a piece of our shared cultural heritage and open ourselves to the wisdom of voices long silenced. And in doing so, we participate in the ongoing conversation about meaning and truth that connects us with seekers across the centuries. Thank you for joining me on this journey. through one of history's most intriguing, forbidden texts. If you found this exploration valuable, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the mysteries of our past. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking the truth wherever it may lead.